Welcome to In Conversation With. I'm Shay in the Catskills, a queer artist and tarotist, intuition facilitator, pleasure activist, contemplative library clerk living in the town of Shandaken in Ulster County in the Catskills of New York. And this is the podcast where I get to talk to artists and esotericists and just people who I think are doing really interesting shit in the world. I'm really excited to have this conversation today with my dear, dear friend, Robyn Love. And I'm going to read this sort of bio for her, which captures just one tiny facet of all that she is. Robyn Love is the founder of Atha Yoga School and a certified yoga therapist. She has decades of personal practice, over 15 years of teaching experience, and thousands of hours of training in the Viniyoga tradition. All of that is good and important, but it doesn't really convey her passion for sharing the profound wisdom of yoga, particularly as it's presented in Patanjali's Yoga Sūtra and other foundational texts. Robyn believes that the ongoing study and practice of a yoga deeply rooted in abhyasa, daily discipline, and vairagyam, acceptance, honors yoga's roots in India and takes up its invitation to explore what it means to be alive in a human body. Her teachers are Chase Bossart, Anita Claney, Dolphi Wertenbaker, and Bhooma Madavan. Robyn also is a student in the Mountains and Rivers Order of Zen Buddhism, and her teacher is Geoffrey Shugen Arnold, Roshi. And Robyn, welcome to In Conversation With.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
The first of many, many conversations, I am sure. We're just going to bite off a little piece today. So let's just land together and check in. How are you arriving? What is the condition of your heart in this moment?
My heart feels very full to be here talking to you with your kitty cat in the background. And also it's we've had a little hot weather here, but now it's back to the normal situation of fall in progress. So I feel excited that I'm wearing a sweater.
Yeah, we're having our summer right now, it seems like. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say about your mood or anything else as you're...
No, I just want to second that. I hope this is the first of several conversations, many conversations. And, conversations with you are such an important part of my life. So it's exciting to share them with others.
Yeah, I feel like our conversations are their own creative process and practice. I have some of my best ideas and insights in conversation with you. So I'm super excited for this too, and it's just the beginning. I am arriving, as you know, before I press record, a little bit all over the place, which when I don't have all of my ducks completely lined up in a row, I find that extremely irritating. So it took a minute to get myself situated, but I feel fully here and fully excited. I've been looking forward to this since we put it on the calendar. So we're going to talk about, talking about our relationship. How did we meet? That's also a whole other podcast, but I will just say briefly that we met at Zen Mountain Monastery, and I was casting my mind back, as I often do when I think about this question of how you and I met, that the moment where I remember sort of saying your name out loud was we were doing some sort of retreat in the Buddha Hall I think it was with Ryushin. And I remember during the lunch break or something, talking to my ex, who was my partner at the time, and saying something about you had shared something in the session, in the retreat. And I said something like, Robyn Love is so beautiful. And my ex said, when people are vulnerable, they're really beautiful. And that's how I sort of remember you kind of coming into focus for me in a particular way. And this was way back when we were just gray robes, with no accoutrement. And I think that for me, our relationship solidified when I was leaving the monastery and you scooped me up off the floor and put me in your Honda CRV and drove me to Newfoundland with you. And that was really the beginning of a whole other phase of our relationship. So I'm just curious if there's anything that you want to add to that.
I remember that retreat. It was a precepts retreat, and I remember what I shared, and it was really vulnerable.
Amazing.
So I'm like appreciating that very freshly right now. And you know, I guess if I had to say, I was always just a little intimidated by you, maybe. And so I wasn't sure, because you always seem to be having very intense conversations with people, which of course I wanted to be one of those people, but it was like, what was my entree going to be? But I remember being put on a Sunday morning post retreat cleaning crew. It might have been the same crew, where we were assigned to clean out the composting toilets and the bathhouse up on the hill. And you were just like, take charge. And I don't know, just what you shared while we were working was very, I was like, yes, at last.
I led the compost toilet cleaning crew for a year. I'll just say. And I don't think I ever fully understood the proper way to clean them. But let me tell you that like Sunday morning program during that work period was, I knew I was going to like have shit on me somewhere. Like, yeah, that was just, ooh. And the whole like having intense conversations, I feel like now I just have the proper containers to have those, you know? And boy, have we had our share of those, like on the regular. Amazing. So I feel like as we do different episodes with different focuses, we can talk about different parts of, because I feel like there's so much there, just because I feel like our friendship, our relationship is a place of not just creativity, but practice. And I feel like I've learned a lot in my friendship with you and continue to, about how to really like, the way intimacy looks in a friendship, or the way it feels, you know?
Yeah.
So we are here in this particular conversation to talk about the Let's Talk About It series, which started in 2021 when do you want to actually tell a little bit of that story, how that started?
Yeah, I'll be curious if it matches yours. Yeah. So in 2021, Atha Yoga actually, you know, began sort of unexpectedly for me as I was finishing up a yoga teacher training, and I hadn't really intended on creating a yoga school, but it so happened that it became a necessity for this training. And then I was like, okay, I have this thing, you know, it exists online. and I felt some obligation to my students to not just have it be this like one-off thing and no one ever hears from Atha Yoga again. So it's like, well, what do I want to do? I want to basically have really interesting conversations with people, because just to preface this, I'll get to Let's Talk About it, but just to say, because when people hear the word yoga, everyone thinks about physical practice, being flexible, blah, blah, blah. This is not the goal of Atha Yoga, just to be clear. Atha Yoga really is based in the yogic philosophies, Vedic philosophies, and how they see the human system in this holistic way. So because there's so much in the world already around asana or postures, really I've made my goal to be to focus on the other aspects of yoga primarily, and as a perspective on liberation from suffering. So,
And what does Atha mean?
Yeah, Atha is the first word of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. And it is the first word of many Vedic texts, in fact. It's a very traditional way of opening an important text, is this word Atha. And Atha means now. It means now. And of course, this appeals to my Zen roots. And I love it because, for so many reasons, but I love it because it really is pointing to this moment, which some people come to when they're sort of looking at their life and thinking, I think it could be different than how it is. That is such a pivotal moment, atha moment of like, oh, wait a minute. And in the full sutra, the first sutra, the Yoga Sutra, is Atha Yoga Anushanam. So it means now we begin the study of yoga. And I feel like that sentence is just something that comes up again and again and again in a practitioner's life and in a practitioner's day. Oh, now I begin the study of yoga. Oh, now
I have tingles all over my whole body. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard you say it quite like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sort of thing I think about with yoga and Zen is like, now I begin the study of yoga, and yoga is right there meeting us. It's ready now.
Yeah.
In exactly the way we need it. So that word is very near and dear to my heart. So yeah, having an opportunity to name a yoga school, it was pretty clear what
I
to
didn't
name.
realize also that that was part of your training, that you had to do that.
What?
That you had to like create a yoga school? Was that?
Well, it wasn't. Well, I had to because of the training, because the people wanted a certificate that the Yoga Alliance gives out, and the original yoga studio wasn't able to do that, so I was like, okay, here we go.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yoga
like, necessity is the mother of invention. Amazing. Yeah, so please continue.
Yeah, so in thinking about, well, what do I really want to do, and having conversations with you, it was like, well, could we have a series where we specifically take up challenging topics and kind of using, to my mind, using the tools of yoga and the frameworks of yoga to hold the conversations, give some kind of foundation to the conversations, and then can we invite people in to have difficult conversations that otherwise feel off limits or taboo or just too scary. Yeah, and I really feel like you have been alongside. We've been moving together. Really, It feels like a collaboration with you.
Totally. I mean, the first one was about money. Let's talk about it, money. And that grew out of, I recall in very clearly having conversations with you through so much of 2021, because I had left the monastery and I was doing tarot, and it was like, I was so mishugana about like pricing my offerings. And we had these conversations where I was like, I want it to be a negotiation every time. And you're like, that's why you don't have any bookings, because nobody wants to do that with you. And I was like, but I so wanted to like get in there. And I was, I'm such an anti-capitalist and blah, 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 and money's bad and it's blah, blah, blah. So we were kind of like, okay, let's talk about it. And we did, I think it was a series of 4 for that one.
Yeah.
And the first session that we did, we told our money autobiographies out loud using real numbers. And I don't know how planned out that was, but I went first, and it was revelatory in all of the ways. You could see people's eyes popping. It's like, we don't talk about that. And there were themes that ran through, like pretending to have more money than you did, or pretending to have less money, and just the secrecy and the kind of dysfunctional relationship. It was, and then it was like to explore that, like, where do we come by that, and looking at like what money is. And anyway, that was really fun, and people were into it. And I brought my tarot framework, and we had the container of, let's talk about it, has a container where you lead a practice. And I'll say I'm not a formal yoga practitioner. And I feel like what the container of let's talk about it does is, in the practice that you lead us through, what you're doing is basically bringing us fully into now and kind of priming our body, heart, mind with some images, some invitations to think about or bring certain things into our mind or heart that kind of lead into grounding the discussion from a place of experience and not idea, not sort of intellectualizing. And I feel like that really is so much the flavor of the format to me. Yeah. Yeah. And you've done them. So money, appetite, anger, which I was thinking that was the only one I haven't done. How ironic is that?
Noted.
And death, which was amazing. And so this fall
and we also did aging and beauty.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. And so this fall, it's let's talk about it, mistakes. And so I'm wondering if you might give us a little look under the hood about how you came to that theme.
Yes, I would love to. But before I do that, I just want to say I had forgotten about some of how all that money things unfolded. And I just also want to say that that one in particular, of maybe of all of them, continues, is the gift that keeps on giving for me. I feel like those conversations have continued in my mind and in my life. It was really an important set of conversations. So,
and a whole other program grew out of that with Jules. And yeah, I think that people are really kind of eager and hungry to talk about it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And it actually gave me some, I don't know, again, with the courage, but like kind of some courage to be more open in just my everyday life, which has given other people permission, is what I see happening. And I actually feel that about all the topics. There's something about kind of getting a ball rolling and getting some words out that kind of starts it growing. So mistakes, I love talking about mistakes. Actually, maybe it's one of my favorites, partly because I think about it in terms of my life as an artist. So not in that bio is the fact that I am also a visual artist. And that's actually my main gig in a way. I don't know, they're so intertwined now, who's to say? But, I think that being an artist is like having permission to make a lot of mistakes in a way that most people don't, I think, have that permission. And what I've observed is that a lot of people have so much fear of making mistakes. And sure, I am, totally part of that too. And perfectionism certainly looms large in my life and in my history. But there's something about being an artist that, certainly my process of having an idea and then trying to carry out that idea and basically never being able to do that as I first imagined. And it kind of makes what we might call a mistake be far less scary and become just sort of normal. But what I've seen is that even I'll bring up in that yoga training that I did, the teacher training, it really came home to me to see people who are adults be so scared to take a test and do any kind of assessment, like panicked, literal panic attacks, and just be caught off guard by that, because that's, not really how I view that kind of stuff. And so it made me think a lot about, just in general, the culture, what is a mistake in our culture? How do we punish people that we have viewed as making mistakes? And what is this whole perfectionism thing anyway? And then thinking about our Zen training and how I think if I got nothing else out of it, other than to really be forced to reckon with making mistakes, I would be more than satisfied. So in the training, if you stick around, eventually they're going to give you a service position, which means you do something to get the services, the liturgy, rituals to happen. And as someone recently said, it's a giant setup. It's all a setup. You're basically set up to make mistakes. I mean, yes, you're set up to help the rituals happen, but we're going to put that aside for a minute. And really, as a training, as a student in training, they don't tell you everything on purpose.
And but I can tell you from having been a former monk that sometimes it's not on purpose. It's just like forgetful, messy training. Yeah,
well,
there's that too.
And there's a lot of moving parts. And yeah, so you get thrown in when you don't totally know what's going on, and you're given a lot of instructions, usually like the day before, 2 days before it actually happens. So you're like, what? I can't remember. Yeah, and so you make a ton of mistakes in a public way, within this realm of however many people are there, but public enough way. And so there's just like continual reckoning with this.
There's public mistakes and then public correction on the spot.
Yes. And I was thinking somewhat in anticipation of this conversation, I recalled I was at the temple. So there's a temple in Brooklyn as well as the monastery upstate near where you are. And we were doing a day-long sit called a zazenkai, where you get to have face-to-face teaching with the teacher, but you also may have a service position. And I was still pretty new. So I would say it was I hadn't done too many zazenkais or whatever, but enough that I was a server for the lunchtime meal. So I was assigned to serve the food to everyone with other people serving the food.
It's a very highly choreographed, complex liturgy, actually. Yeah.
Beautiful. And basically my nightmare in the beginning. Do
you remember sitting there and getting served and thinking like, God, I hope I never have to do that?
Yes.
And then the rest of your life you're doing it.
It was almost a reason why I quit, actually. Yeah, it was like, how badly do I want this? But I had this moment in that particular zazenkai that day, being a server, where suddenly it clicked for me that offering, there's these big bowls with rice, and there's hand signals because you're in silence, but like the act of serving someone their lunch was so beautiful, and I was so happy to do it, and I just wanted to do it well because I wanted to do it well, because I loved to serve them their lunch. It was so simple. And I remember going into the face-to-face and being like, I had thought that this service position was like a referendum on my character. And whether I did it well or not determined whether I was a good person or not. Oh, but suddenly I was like, no, it's about serving, actually.
It's about nourishing people.
Yes. And I don't know, that just was like a life-turning moment where it was like, oh, everything is not a referendum on my character. In fact,
I remember it might have been one of my first sesshin that I did at the temple. So that's how early it was, because I hadn't even moved up here yet. And I remember an open sozan saying that I felt like I did the whole sesshin waiting for someone to yell at me, in my body, I was just clenched for someone to be like, what is wrong with you? I mean, yeah, you bring your whole childhood and everything and many lifetimes to those moments. I also just want to pause here real quick, because I realize I want to just say that Let's Talk About It Mistakes is happening this fall. And the first session is actually happening next Saturday, Saturday, September 16th at noon Eastern with you. You're leading the series off. There's 3 sessions, one next Saturday, one in October, and one in November. And so I just want to sort of let people know that you're leading it off with kind of like grounding us in like, what are mistakes, and sort of getting the ball rolling. So as we like get in the weeds here, I just want to peek out for a second and say, that's happening. And now we can like resubmerge. I wanted to say, like, after we've been sort of talking about having this conversation and you mentioned service position training, I want to say, for all of the many things that I could say about the monastery, I do feel like it taught me to let a correction completely roll off my back. Like, because it otherwise I just would have been, I mean, I did suffer there a lot, much of it self-imposed, perhaps 99% of it self-imposed. And I learned how to just not have it phase me to, and I can remember particular moments of recognizing that, of like someone just corrected me in front of all of these people and I'm not having any somatic reaction. I feel neutral. And like, that's kind of amazing because, you named perfectionism and anxiety about test taking. And like, this is just a good moment to mention white supremacy culture. Perfectionism is a hallmark of white supremacy culture. It's a dysfunctional relationship with aliveness and with the fundamental activity of life. And we come by it honestly because the stakes for making mistakes in our culture are very high, that ultimately, quote unquote, mistakes could lead you to not have a house, not have healthcare, be locked in a cage. This is the stakes that we're talking about. So, and I think that the sort of internal panic and stakes for people with, marginalized identities, multiple marginalized identities, neurodiversity, not, functioning inside of this particular education system, that all of those things to just name that, like, we each have our particular experience of it. And it is a cultural inheritance and conditioning that we get. And so, mistakes, like on the one hand, we can sort of say from the perspective of working so deeply within different spiritual practices that like, what is a mistake? But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, mistakes are a matter of life and death, like literally.
Yeah, thank you for framing that. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, it's the punishment for a quote unquote mistake. I mean, like putting your hand in your pocket.
Those aren't even mistakes. Those are just living.
Well, I mean, that's it. It's not a mistake. It's
Yeah,
just being alive in a particular kind of body in a
totally.
context that we're in. Yeah.
And
100%.
yet, I think it's really interesting for you to frame sort of being an artist as having like permission to make mistakes and how unusual that is and it is, because I'll tell you, like in most of the jobs I had, it, it wasn't great news when somebody made a mistake, it was a problem, and so it's interesting that like being an artist or the creative process is a place where mistakes actually can transform. When you were talking about having an idea in your mind and never being able to like realize it in that way, sometimes that's disappointing, but sometimes that's like surprisingly amazing because it's better.
Yeah, 99.9% of the time. Yeah. Yeah. And not to say that the art world is immune to perfection. I mean, I remember giving an artist talk once, and I talked about a project that I felt had not been realized the way I envisioned, to the point, I mean, I would rarely say a failure, but it was definitely like, you know. And someone said something afterwards like, wow, I've never heard an artist, kind of admit they had a bad project. I was like,
Oh my gosh, that's a shame that that's not more because I mean, hello, how could
I
you be an
know.
artist without having like, how could you do anything worthwhile without having major failures?
Yeah, I think there's some Albert Einstein quotes about this too, about
Yeah.
science and failure. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and I feel like I heard this interview on CBC radio driving home one day, and it was someone had done a study on what I don't remember exactly their perimeters, but it is like, why are people who are creative, artists, musicians, writers, how are they different than everybody else? Of course, they're not, but let's just say, right? And so what do they do that's different? And a key component of it was they allow mistakes. They allow for mistakes, and they don't see them as a problem. And this made such an impression on me because the way they laid it out was they have this kind of discipline where they go in, even if they don't feel like it, you write or you make art or you do what your creative work is, even when you're sort of like, well, and it's an opportunity to, like, through that, you begin to see things about yourself and about the world. And there's this kind of introspection that happens that is a necessary piece of creativity. And there's this sense that nothing's really a mistake. Mm-hmm. And as I was listening to this radio show on this topic, I was like, oh, this is exactly the way the Yoga Sutra talks about what's called Kriya Yoga, or the yoga of action. And it starts out the second chapter in the Yoga Sutra with this definition of what is Kriya Yoga. And it's literally defined as like intentional effort, self-study, and then this kind of trust that you're held.
What is the language for the trust that you're held? What is that in the sutra?
In the Sanskrit?
Yeah.
It's, well, the whole sutra is very short. It's just tapaha. So that's the effort, the intentional effort. Literally means friction. So it's like when your idea of what should be happening bumps up against what's really happening.
A little 5 of Wands energy for my tarot people out there. Okay.
Yeah. And then, which creates the opportunities for swadhyaya, or self-study, and is held within this, it's called Ishvara Pranidhana. Lots of ways of interpreting that term. I'm going to set aside the Ishvara part and just focus on the Pranidhana, which can be broken out to mean to be held completely continuously. For me, it's like
goals.
Like, and it's, it's kind of, to me, it's like this continuous cycle where we move through, we need all three, and we kind of cycle through, and we depend on them, and it defines it, and it gives us the path of how to be, like you have to make an effort, and something it'll show you what's like, it's like giving your service position, and then you screw it up and you see, oh, when I make mistakes, I like turn red, and then I get mad at the person who pointed it out. And, like that's the svadhyaya. Oh, this is my pattern. And then it's okay because it's all held. I'm held completely continuously. So where's the mistake? Where's the mistake?
I was just listening to the poet Andrea Gibson on the For the Wild podcast, and they use the term riding the wave of the universe. And that's the image I had in my mind when you were talking about being held continuously, being completely held continuously. It's sort of like when we can drop into that space where we're not trying to control what's happening, but we let what has happened happen and change us in some way.
Yeah.
And I love that, starting the cycle kind of over again. Yeah. What is the dream of having a life without tapas? I mean, I'm like the most tapas person in the world. Like, why would I even pretend that that's something? But there is some weird fantasy, right, about things just being easy or smooth.
Yeah.
It's like dead.
Yeah. No, I know. And I know I sent you that just that bio, and I was like, oh, I gave her a mouthful of Sanskrit there, which you did beautifully, by the way.
Thank you. I was like, she'll correct me if she needs to.
But in a way, what I described, so that abhyasa, daily discipline, vairagyam, acceptance, in some ways it is saying the same thing. It's actually saying exactly the same thing. Abhyasa, vairagyam could be also known tapaha, svadhyaya, ishvara. They're like kind of the same idea. We always have to have some kind of effort, discipline.
Huh.
There's no way around it.
You know, we could get so in the weeds here, and I'm gonna reel us back in a second. But I was also listening to Adrienne Marie Brown on Glennon Doyle's podcast, and she was saying, they were talking about discipline and rigor, and Adrienne Marie Brown was saying that like her discipline and rigor at this time in her life is about like when she realizes that she's in a moment where like, I don't actually want to be here, or I don't want to be with this person, or I don't want to do this thing, she like doesn't, she like she's like, okay, like I'm not going to do that. Like her rigor and discipline is about staying aligned with her intentions and desires and the things that she has like identified as like what she wants to do. And so I just think it's interesting to widen the lens about, you know, because we hear the word discipline and it means something to us. And what does it mean for us to be rigorous or disciplined about the things that we say we most want and most care about, whatever that is?
Yeah, and I think it's exactly correct in that there's no, we need to take back that word. I because it's really, it has nothing to do with being a militant person. It's the opposite of that, actually.
Well,
Because
it comes from disciple, which is like a student, you know? Yeah. The self-study part, I was thinking about the Page of Pentacles, or all of the pages, actually, the Page of Wands. That feels like the, you know, and then trusting, what is it, being held continuously?
completely continuously.
I have to think about that. That's probably a major arcana. I want to think about what that would feel like. Maybe the world in some ways. But so I want to say, you know, not being a formal yoga practitioner myself, I just want to like kind of highlight that all of your years of study and practice and teaching, it's like you're taking these pieces of the sutras that you've studied and these, you know, teachings and concepts and making them and really putting them in the ordinary language of everyday life. And I think that that's an approach that you and I share from our respective disciplines, is like, what does this mean in my actual life? How do I identify this? How do I practice it? How do I observe it or notice it? And so I just want to say, like, that's such a part of like coming to Let's Talk About It. You know, I don't know if you want to say anything about in particular what you're going to be doing or what you're thinking about doing, or if you don't want to, but maybe you just want to say a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for continually reining us back. I can get very.
I know we could be here all night.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to also just give a shout out to my teachers who have really and I feel like it is the Viniyoga tradition. I will also mention TKV Desikachar, who is the teacher in Chennai, India, now deceased, but and his father, Sri Krishnamacharya. They really, you know, created this particular perspective that is very rigorous in terms of its study, and none of that is important if we can't apply it to our everyday life. Like, it's very practical and very always about like, what's the application in our life? And yeah, I'm actually taking right now a class through it's called the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. They're in Chennai, but they have online programs which people can attend. And I'm taking a class right now. It's like 12-week class on the word pranidhana.
Oh my God. Of course you are. I mean, I just am like, oh my gosh, you must be in such a bliss state when you're like, yeah, that's so up your alley.
It's actually part 2. So they've already done 12 weeks.
Amazing.
So just to say, like, that's the depth that's possible, you know, and yeah, so it's meaningless if we can't apply it to our everyday life. And so I actually think, you know, as I've been thinking about like, Yoga Sutra doesn't say anything expressly about mistakes. That's not how it frames things ever. But it does talk about our obstacles, a list of 9 obstacles in our life, and how to understand it's the relationship to things that come up naturally in a human body, and mind and heart. And so the question is really like, okay, like you get sick. Is that an obstacle? And then it talks about what does suffering look like in a human system? What are the symptoms? It never defines what is suffering. It just gives the symptoms of suffering. So I feel like we can kind of look at concepts that it brings forward and just kind of ask ourselves, okay, so something comes up in my life that's bad. I did something and now everyone's mad at me, or whatever. What do you call a mistake? Okay, so if you look at it through this particular lens, how can you see it in a way that's closer to the reality? Because really, ultimately, yoga is about seeing clearly. When they talk about what is liberated in yoga, it's your seeing, your perceiving is liberated. It's not like, oh, my soul is liberated, my body is liberated, my mind is no, it's our perception is that it gets liberated. That's what they mean by liberation. So if you want to, how can I really see clearly what's going on so that, we all make mistakes, like guaranteed, right? So the question then is like, how am I perceiving what the results of my actions are? That's the question more than anything. So I think we can relate to that.
I was talking with Hakeem yesterday, my friend Hakeem, who's my pen pal and now my dear friend. He's incarcerated in Illinois. And he was talking about that a really good way to gauge how things are going with your mental health is what happens in he didn't use this phrase, but an uncontrolled moment, or we could call it a mistake. Like when you drop something or spill something, or, that your immediate response to that. And I feel like that's really true. You know what I mean? That, before we'd had that conversation, I had spilled Kali's food all over the floor, like went everywhere in every direction. And I just laughed, and that when we had that conversation, I was like, oh yeah, my shout out to 50 milligrams of sertraline every day. My mental health is pretty good. That, a sort of moment like that in another state, I have been in states where a moment like that could undo me for an entire day. So it's just interesting. I love what you're saying about like liberation is liberating your perception. It's like what is actually happening right now in this moment. I wonder if you want to say a little bit about Nancy Hunter is leading the session next month, October. Do you have the date handy, or should I can look it up while you talk about it?
Third Saturday of each one. But and I just actually want to say that in the sessions, they're 90 minutes long, and there's usually, a quick intro, and then we do about a 20-minute guided practice, which includes some very gentle movement. Oftentimes you're seated the whole time, or maybe you're standing. And as you had said, there's some, encouragement to breathe in a particular way, just because one of the symptoms of suffering is a short, shallow breath that is in the Yoga Sutra. So we're always trying to get people to breathe long and slow so that we suffer less. And there's a very interesting Sanskrit word called bhavana. And the root of it, bhava, means to become. And it means the direction. So the direction of the practice. And that's, if you're given something to think about, a question or an image. I often think about, like, when you talk about the bhavana of a practice, it's like, oh, what do I want people to become? Pointing them towards in this practice. So there's always some kind of bhavana in the practice. And then we come back and do some kind of main discussion activity. It could be an activity, it could just be a discussion with a prompt. And that's generally, then we come back and share our experiences. And that part is always so rich. And that really is the let's talk about it piece of everyone bringing themselves fully to the moment and to the gathering and sharing. And yeah.
And being witnessed in that.
Unpredictably beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Being witnessed in that sharing. I feel like that is part of the container too, is that, you know, to be able to see something or observe something about oneself or one's experience and say it out loud and have other people receive it. It's very potent, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And I think both you and I, having done now a bunch of them together, we just continually talk about trust. You know, we just continually trust more and more that we don't have to do so much as the facilitator, because people do bring themselves and offer their wisdom of their experience. It's very beautiful. Yeah. And so
Nancy's is on October 21st.
Okay, yes, October. And she is going to be, so Nancy Hunter is a yoga therapist in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and she also does a lot of work in social justice arena. And so she's going to be bringing more, like mine is going to be kind of framing it within how does yoga think about, what are some ways we could think about it from a yogic lens. And then she's going to say like, okay, but there is real harm in the world. People are doing bad things. Sometimes we're doing bad things, you know, in a white supremacist colonial culture that is the air we breathe. We're all perpetuating harm one way or another. So what do we do with that? You know, how do we hold people accountable and ourselves accountable without falling into this shame and blame of cancel culture? And this is her daily, you know.
She's excited to talk about it. Yeah. Some people would like, that's a third rail. They don't even want to go there. And she's like, let me in there. I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah. And she has a lot of on the ground experience. So it really is going to be very much based in like our real life. It's not theoretical. It's going to be like, let's take it up. This is really the point. Yeah. And then you will be doing the third.
Yeah. November 18th, using tarot to work with regret. So that's how we're going to close it out. It's a very delicious. I really like the progression. I mean, the sessions can be taken individually, but this series in particular feels like the sessions really build on each other. And so I'm super excited for this next Saturday. And we're going to have links to, you know, find out more and register and sign up and all of the things. But I think this is going to be an amazing one. I'm really excited. Is there anything else that you want to say about this before we move to the Q&A?
Well, I think I probably said too much. So
I mean, I really do. It's the danger of you and I getting in a Zoom room is that it could just, I mean, it's so delicious. And I hope people are feeling that too, the deliciousness of when we get together. So this is the Q&A quick fire round, so called. And also we can take as much time as we want. But
I did listen to your talk with Camille and I was like, okay, they're not really like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be like that.
Hold on a second.
Take your time. I'm going to take a pause here. So country living is you never know when somebody's going to stop by. We love that, actually. I have my little sign on the door that says recording because people just will come in. You live in Newfoundland in a little tiny place. And I also live in a little tiny place. Shout out to country living where your neighbors just like come right over. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yes, it is beautiful.
So typically I would have like thought about these myself beforehand and I haven't. So I'm just thinking about them off the top of my head. And do you want to go first or do you want me to? Or so what are you practicing right now?
I did think about this one a little bit. I didn't get down the full list, so I thought others. uh, yeah, I feel like I'm in a real moment of seeing a lifetime pattern of always, I guess always being in this game of comparison, and then deciding I'm up or I'm down, and then acting out of that. And yeah, and just really having a few experiences recently where I'm like, that is not helpful. So I'm really trying to notice this tendency to kind of place myself and then act, and kind of maybe see that there's a way to actually hold more complexity among everything, so that there's no need for this up and down.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I'm practicing sobriety. It's been, I'm an occasional, well, I mean, practicing sobriety, is it occasional? Smoke some weed, drink a beer or whatever. And I've just been noticing that, like, I've been doing that with more frequency. And the thing that when I actually take a couple days off, that the thing I've been sort of observing and having to really practice, because once you get that ball rolling, I mean, is that there are moments where I, in my body mind, feel like I just need to relax. I need a break. I'm, and this is going to help me. And then when I take a couple days off, I can see that it's actually when I'm using substances too often, that's what's making me feel terrible.
Mm.
Right. So there are ways that actually I can use it that is fun, and I feel like I get to experiment with my mind and my consciousness and my sensations. But if it's too frequent, that stops, and it's just like this maintenance thing. And it's like observing, like yesterday, I had a moment. It was the day before. I had a very full day and I got home, and that's the moment that I would typically like reach for it. And I was like, I had to like literally talk to myself, like, just go dip in the creek first and see how you feel, and then see if you still want it, like having to talk to myself this way. And, part of me is like, it's hard to feel in these times, shout out to all my sensitives out there. It's hard. And I have a very full and generative and amazing life, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So I've just been working with, like, what do I need actually in this moment? Like, I always give myself, you can always exercise the option, but just go lay on the floor for 5 minutes.
Mm.
Don't pick up your phone. Those all feel related, just this sort of like. So anyway, that's a very long answer to, like, I am practicing my relationship to numbness and aliveness, in all of the many ways. And it feels like by my fingernails a lot of the time. Ooh. Okay. What or who are you listening to right now?
I'm really like not a big listener, in the sense of like I don't really listen to music or podcasts. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, maybe I would say the birds. I'm listening to the birds. I have my one crow buddy who comes around every day and caws for snacks. And I have the blue jays who've also discovered, and then the
You're a
little
mark now. They got your
yeah,
number.
they totally do. Yeah, I seem to have a bunch of bird friends these days that I listen for.
Yeah, great answer. Same over here. I feel like, yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but really the thing that I feel tuned into is the curtains of insect sounds, because that's going to be fading soon. This is like kind of the end of the season. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll like go to bed and like listen to and it's like, no, don't listen to a podcast. Like you're having the late season symphony that's not going to be here much longer. So here's to that. I also don't listen to music that much. Um,
I sometimes think it's a deficiency, but I don't know. What
I
can
don't,
I do?
yeah, I don't know what that is. I used to not listen to it because it was so emotionally evocative. It was like I didn't need to be stirred up, but it's like even listening to something unfamiliar, it's yeah, I go through my moods with that. Okay. What are you reading right now?
Mm. Well, I'm reading actually a book that you recommended called My Brilliant Friend, which is part of a trilogy. So I'm just really only, in the first third of it and loving it. And I'm always reading either some kind of Buddhist or yogic texts. And I've been reading actually several books about sea women in Iceland. A niche topic, but a fascinating one nonetheless. Yeah, because of one art project I'm working on right now that I plan to take to Iceland that involves women in the fishery, and so some
We're gonna
historic.
have a whole episode about that. I think maybe that's the next one. I want to talk to you about it. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
leave it unsaid at the moment
yes.
because we don't want to spend the juice casually. Yeah, I love that. I am reading, it's right here, fortunately. It's called Ways of Being by this artist and uh, technologist and sort of Renaissance person, James Bridle, who I heard interviewed on the For the Wild podcast about modes of intelligence. And the episode was so fascinating that I just restarted it when it ended. And I was like, what books of theirs are in the library system? And it's incredible. I just started, but their writing is so accessible and their mind is so incredibly beautiful and generative. And they're just pulling from so many different um places. So yeah, I'm it's very delicious. What are you watching right now? Could be media, but it could also be like other things.
Hmm. Well, I am definitely watching the fall come into its full color here in Newfoundland. It's been amazing in the last 2 weeks how dramatic it's been. Summer is over for sure. And the light changing, it's quite also dramatic here because in the summer the days are incredibly long, and then it seems like it just goes off a cliff sometime starting in mid-August. So now the days are already like, wow, getting super short. So the light change. And, I have to say, watching, in my own addictive way, I guess, I, as a way of actually ending my day, I like to watch some, I don't have a TV, but the equivalent on my laptop. And yeah, kind of noticing what that's really about. But because I don't want to watch anything that's taxing in any way. Basically, I just want to either laugh or like watch British people cook things.
Blessed be that. I mean, if you're gonna watch something, let it be that.
So yeah.
I mean,
So
that
I
sounds like a very wholesome way to wind down the day, actually. Um,
roast.
I am watching the cottonwood leaves right now. They're the round leaves that kind of shimmer, kind of like coins. I think they're cottonwoods. They're the ones that shed all that cottony stuff in the spring. And just their leaves are, I mean, I feel like I started paying attention to them when I lived at the monastery during sessions, just like sitting there, like, and there's a lot of them around here. And so that's definitely, and I'm always watching the crows. I mean, you know, what question are you living into right now?
Hmm. For me, the big question, and maybe this is related to the first, what am I practicing? for the question is always, what else is true?
Mm.
What
Yeah,
else
that's
is
such a good one. Yeah. I think it's asking myself, what do you actually need right now? Or what do you actually want right now? As a way of interrupting habits.
Hmm.
Um, what's keeping you up at night right now?
I mean, my first thought is like the end of the world, the collapse of everything I've known my whole life.
Yeah.
That keeps me up. You know, and I will say also the artwork that I'm working on right now, the project I'm involved in. Yeah, that's
It's
the good thing that
yeah,
keeps
it's
me
good
up.
to have a dialectic of like the dire and the inspiring. Maybe that's the next question. I mean, same for me is sort of like I don't know which thread to pull on about what's keeping me up at night. Um, so what's inspiring you right now?
Hmm. I mean, you know, it feels weird to say this project because it's like I'm generating it, but just to be clear, like for me at this point in my art making life, I don't feel like I own my work. It's really not personal. You know, so I feel like that gives me permission to speak honestly about it. So I think, yeah, uh and it also involves other people and they inspire me. So
I mean, here's to
and
be inspired by our own work. I feel like you don't even need to like disclaim or qualify that. I mean, I think what an incredible, may everyone feel inspired by what they're working on.
yeah, like I mean, if it's not generating, then why are you doing it, right?
How
And yeah,
delicious.
yeah, and also I want to give a shout out to someone you interviewed recently, Jody Hojan Kimmel Sensei, who is a teacher in the Mountains and Rivers Order, and the abbot at the temple in Brooklyn. She does Friday art, online art practice, and today is Friday, so I did, and she's just the best. I mean, she inspires me so much, so
Mm,
much.
mm, yeah, same. Who's or what's inspiring me now is an artist named Roberta Baffo, who I found maybe on Instagram and then went into a wormhole. She's an Italian artist who lived in China for some time and studied, I think, traditional brush painting techniques and learned a lot about making inks but she's made it completely her own. And um, yeah, I'm just kind of like, oh my gosh, I want to be Roberta Baffo. She talks about like self-obliteration through repetition in her work. It's reminds me very much of Yayoi Kusama in that way, that she's, has compelled and it's very detailed and small and, and just beautiful, absolutely. And just the way she pours herself into it. I think I'm kind of like, I'll have what she's having. I'm like looking for that a little bit. So that's inspiring me. What has your attention right now?
Uh, hmm. And well, you know, how to answer this. I feel like it's a mixture. I want to say this week has been all about hearing about friends, my dearest friends falling very ill and just being really quite absorbed in being far away from them and yeah, just sort of realizing that the people I want to be around forever are not going to be here forever. And yeah, it's really taking a lot of energy to stay steady in that.
Mm, mm, mm. Thank you for that. That's so tender. Yeah. Yeah. What has my attention is I took the month of August off from teaching, and I'm starting teaching again tomorrow. My cohorts are starting up, and so that has my attention in a very delicious, anticipatory. I can't wait to like see folks in the Zoom room and sling some cards and talk about all the things. So that has my attention in a good way. And how are you evolving?
Hmm. You know, I feel like kind of in the way I started talking about the comparison thing, another way to kind of to maybe frame that, and that I think this is a big question that I'm also living into, is what is the right relationship to power and to humility? And because I feel like I have misunderstood those two things. And there is a way to understand them that is very useful and beneficial to everyone, and ultimately correct, actually correct, in that I get to be my fullest person in this body and mind, heart. And that means that I am correct and doing what I'm supposed to be doing for the biggest benefit to all. And yeah, I think kind of just I don't know, figuring it out, but like feeling into that.
That's juicy. I love that. I love hearing it framed that way. I think I'm evolving right now. I had a natal chart reading with Corey Nakasue, I'll interview soon. She's an astrologer based in Kingston. And she said some things, she saw in the chart that kind of put me back in like, it's not supposed to be like free and easy for me. Like that's just not indicated by the chart. And I was talking to a friend yesterday about this. Like, okay, if sort of the prescription in this life is to be, um, effort and refining and shaping and pressing and testing and, then like what is the arena for that? That's not like interpersonal conflict. And she said art. And I was like, so I think that the evolving has to do with kind of accepting this thing that has been true about me my whole life in different ways and has manifested in much more annoying and to everyone ways, and to sort of grab hold of this part of myself and see what it can do in a different kind of context, I think.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, in a way, I feel like we're kind of saying the same thing, really.
Isn't it amazing to hear it like articulated in different ways?
Yeah. But I love, we'll talk about like Ishvara Pranidhana or vairagyam. Like there is a moment right there of like, oh, if this is who I am, like, then why am I fighting so hard?
Why am I trying to evolve into someone that I'm not, instead
Yeah,
of
well,
evolving into who I am, but like you're saying, in this sort of best expression of this energy, like putting it in the best possible place to the best possible use. And yeah, that's its own whole, it feels almost like starting my life not over again, but it's like it feels like the fool stepping into the journey again.
yeah. And just to say, like when we talk about like the tapas, the tapaha, the friction, the heat, it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean friction and heat from this sort of like needless fighting and that kind of effort, it's no, this is the friction and heat that comes when we're on, just because you're on the right path doesn't mean it's easy.
So good. This was as delicious as I wanted it to be. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to have links to Let's Talk About It and all of the other things. And I can't wait for our next conversation. Thank you.
Me either. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.